It was about a year ago when ERCOT first told the world that demand might actually double in the next 5 years. That set off a chain reaction of meetings and actions and all sorts of things. And that has led up to this legislative session where there is a real focus on whether or not we can actually meet this rising load growth. As a matter of fact, just last week, ERCOT came out with more projections that instead of doubling, we might actually need to triple our demand because of all of the different data centers and sources of industrial electrification, et cetera, that are exploring connecting to the ERCOT grid. Now, they have a more midline projection, which still shows a 75% growth in the next 5 years. There was a fascinating exchange on April 9th at the House State Affairs Committee. This is the committee in the legislature that has jurisdiction over the ERCOT grid and over the Public Utility Commission. And one of the members of that committee, Representative Anchía, was talking to the ERCOT CEO, Pablo Vegas, about this load growth and whether or not the ERCOT market could actually meet the challenge. Let's listen.
And so I'll just ask a meta question at the outset. Do you believe that the market forces exist today, absent heavy government involvement, for us to meet load forecast?
I do. I think the market as structured today is very well suited to support the growth trajectories that we're seeing increase in the state of Texas. And it's not just the government support functions, it's the fact that we have a very light regulatory environment that enables businesses to put their capital to work here.
There are all sorts of efforts to mess around with the market structure. But here is the CEO of ERCOT saying the market structure that we have is well suited to meet massive growth of demand. He said at another point during this hearing 75% growth over the next 5 to 6 years. And the market structure is well suited for that because there is not a ton of regulation, because market actors can find each other and transact in the ERCOT market. But there are all these bills. Senate Bill 819, Senate Bill 715, Senate Bill 388. They would mess around with the market structure, make it harder for new generation sources to get online, and really mess all of that up. Representative Anchía wanted to ask Pablo Vegas, what do we need? What kind of resources do we actually need in order to meet this load growth? Let's listen to this.
It sounds like we're going to need every electron brought to bear in our system that we can possibly find, whether it's from new generation, whether it's from conservation or energy efficiency, new distribution. I know that Chairman Darby's working on. We need to have a more efficient transmission system. We need all of it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Would you agree with that assessment?
I would agree with that.
So there's Representative Anchía asking, do we need an all of the above approach? Do we need energy efficiency, renewables, better transmission, gas? Do we need all of the above? And ERCOT CEO Vegas says, yes, we do. Now, with this rising load growth coming, there is a huge question of what do you do in the next 3 to 4 years? There's a lot of folks that think that gas is a panacea, but it's really actually hard to get gas right now. Let's listen to this next exchange where Representative Anchía asks Pablo Vegas about that very thing.
So 8 to 10, just as a rule of thumb, let's take the high end of that, let's say 10 gigawatts come online. When do you think they hit? In other words, we're trying to meet up supply and demand here. Texas Energy Fund strategy, do we anticipate that supply would come online by that sort of the 2031 out years in your projection?
Yeah, it's on the back half of this table that we'll start to see the thermal supply being able to be built because of just the fact it takes, the natural time to build it plus the supply chain constraints that are being experienced. So it's definitely in the 28, 29, 2030 years.
2029, 2030, that's when we're looking at getting more gas onto the system. There'll be some in the years between now and then, but if you're really looking to scale gas and you think that this 44 gigawatts of load growth, which is now the midline projection ERCOT is making, we might get 10 by 2030. Where's the other 34 coming from? This is why Senate Bill 819, Senate Bill 388, Senate Bill 715 This is why these bills are so dangerous. Because if you really limit the growth of renewables, you are limiting the growth of the Texas economy, because where is that 34 gigawatts going to come from? This is, by the way, also why energy efficiency and demand side resources are so incredibly important as well. Now, then the question becomes, does the state need to do something? Do we need some policy intervention to get more gas onto the system? Is something like the Texas Energy Fund actually necessary, or is there something else that might bring additional sources of power onto the grid? Let's listen to this next answer.
What I think we're going to see is bilateral contracts, basically arrangements between the data centers and the power suppliers
Yeah.
to actually bring power to the grid in order to support it. They have the money to do so. They want to get speed to market. It makes sense that we would see supply develop through that too.
Bilateral contracts. So a buyer and a seller finding each other in a market, absent a whole lot of government interference. Of course, there's some regulation around that. But these data centers, if the structure is set up right, will be the solution to the problem they're causing. They will bring the power with them. You don't need the state to put an $80,000 a megawatt completion bonus, which is what's in the Texas Energy Fund, for a gas turbine that is $2 to $3 million a megawatt. 80,000 is a tiny percentage for them. Meta, Google, OpenAI, all of these companies, Microsoft, et cetera, they have big balance sheets. They can afford to bring that generation with them. The solution is right there within the problem. And this is why we can solve this in Texas. If legislators don't get in and monkey around with the market structure a lot, this is why you see pretty broad consensus across the industry, including organizations that represent thermal generators, not wanting to mess with the market structure this session. There have been a number of reforms instituted. Leave that regulatory certainty. Let the market actually work here. And the fundamental question right now is, do the conservative Republicans that are supposedly conservative Republicans that are in charge right now trust competition and markets, or do they want to be big government conservatives and put their fingers, or really their whole weight, on the scale to change things around? Because if they do that, the outcomes that they're after, they're actually going to end up further away. The more they push, they're going to push it further away. So this was a really fascinating exchange to me, listening to it in real time between Representative Anchía and Pablo Vegas. And I think I don't always agree. You guys know, if you read the Texas Energy Power newsletter, you listen to the Energy Capital podcast, I don't agree with ERCOT on a whole lot of things. I've read a lot of articles very critical of that, but I think in this, Pablo is dead on. We do have a market structure that can bring reliability. All right, I'm going to leave it there. I hope this was interesting. Check out DougLewin.com for more updates on the legislative session, on all things ERCOT and PUC. Listen to the podcast, subscribe to the newsletter, and thanks for listening.